Welcome to our next breakout session, rolling out goals that actually stick. Here to moderate is Lattice's lead people partner, Helen Fahey.
So excited to have everyone here today. I am so excited to introduce this panel. We have some fantastic people for today for you. I know it's afternoon, so just who's team V2 Mom? Any V2 Mom fans here? No? Team OKR. There we go. Team SMART Goals. All right, here we go. So that's going to be our session today. We're talking about goals. We have some great practical tips for you, but excited to jump in. I'm going to pass it to Jessica to introduce herself, and then the rest of the panel as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Davila. I am currently the Chief People Officer at an AI native nonprofit based out of New York. I've been in people for over 20 years. I refuse to add to that. 20-ish years. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and I'll pass it over to Courtney.
Great, thank you so much for having me. I'm Courtney Ellis. I'm currently doing some talent advisory work and HR consulting as an interim chief people officer. Before that, my most recent operator role was at a audit risk and compliance scale-up tech company, and I'm excited to pass it over to Alexis.
I'm Alexis MacDonald. I'm the VP of People for a company called Klue. We do competitive intelligence, make competitive intelligence software. We're based up in Canada. I'm based out of Toronto. And excited to dive in.
Love it. Like I said, some heavy hitters, amazing panel here. So let's get started with the basics. Why do we have goals?
Yeah, why do we have goals? And why are we doing all this work and we're never actually working on our goals, right? I saw a meme recently that said, hey girl, it seems like you haven't touched are you okay? You haven't touched your OKRs lately? And that felt very real. So why do we have goals? I think ultimately, when I think about the purpose behind goals is that it's really that connective tissue between the strategy that we're trying to achieve that year and the work we're actually trying to do every day. So you should be able to read a company's objectives and go, okay, I have a sense of the strategy. And that's really hard to do. That's hard to nail. And I don't think we always get it right. I think it's always a process of evolution. What do you guys think? Who in the room works in a company that has a goal setting process? Raise your hand. Keep them up. And who believes that process is working? Yeah, I'm sorry. How many of you have had your goals change on you unexpectedly, mid? Yeah, exactly. And how many people think it's nailed? No hands. It should be all of our hands, but it's not because it's hard stuff. So yeah, I really think it's about that connective tissue.
100%. Once those top level goals are set, how do you ensure they mean something to the organization?
I'll probably start that one. I think ownership is a word that comes up a lot in our organizations, especially driving employee ownership and accountability and what that means. And so my experience, the most effective way to do that is that at the top level, we have a long-term vision, maybe 2-3 years. We build a strategy, whether it's at the company level or the functional level. And then it's really this very high-level, broad thing. And then I've brought my team in to decide the how versus it actually being top-down. And I think that's the most effective thing, is that if we are all deciding the goals together, you get way more buy-in. And back to that buzzword, a lot more ownership at the employee level, which I think is what we're after, is to have every employee truly own their goals.
I think, a lot of times we talk about goals being visible, being tangible, being quantifiable. All of those things I think are really important to making sure you have effective goals and ownership. But too often, even with those things, goals can just be something that lives in a system, gets talked about in meetings, and doesn't mean anything personally to employees. So when I think back on it, it's how do you architect the storytelling to make sure that each employee understands how their work contributes to a goal? For instance, years ago, I worked for an energy tech company, And one of our goals as a company was in a particular year to be able to save enough energy to basically be equivalent to taking New York City off the power grid for a year. It's a pretty big and audacious goal, and we really wanted to drill home this is something we need everyone on board for. So yeah, we flashed it on all of our screens within offices. It was on our intranet, and we were able to track kind of how we measured up to it. But in meetings, it wasn't just about talking about where we were, it was talking about how we got there. So by bringing this new customer online, this is how much closer we got, and here's what we need to do to continue to close that gap. And that really helped people understand how their work contributed to our big, audacious goal as a company.
That's such a great example. I feel like sometimes we put too many expectations on our goals, and we expect our goals to actually clearly dictate the how. But a framing I always like is that the goal, like you just said in your example, the goal is, it's not actually the answer, it's the question, and then every team needs to come up with their own answers to that question.
Love that.
I love embedding in the process, making sure employees feel like they're a part of it. It's not something that's happening to them, it's happening with them. So great points. What are some common mistakes you guys see with goal setting? What do you like about the process? What do you wish you could change?
So I'll kick that one off. I think the biggest pitfall I've seen is not getting executive alignment on the type of goal setting culture you want to be. And what I mean by that is, I've been at companies where we'll say, you know what, we're going to do OKRs, which is a methodology that exists already. We didn't make it up, right? It has its own rules and framework. And that framework says 70% of attainment is great, and the rest is really aspirational. But in this example, we said we're going to do OKRs, and we're going to tie them so closely to our financial results that if we don't hit at 100%, we failed. And so just starting right there on what type of culture are we? Do we have to hit 100%? And that's that. That's what the board is looking for. Do we want to be really aspirational? And so 70% makes sense. And then once you decide that, make sure your managers are living it too. Because in that same example, some managers were doing the 70-30. Some managers were doing the 100%. And I've got to tell you, that was the funnest calibration year that I think I've ever experienced. Working with department leaders on performance and who's performing well, and hearing them describe meeting and exceed so very differently. That was a learning lesson for me, for sure. So let's start there. Who are we? How do we want to set goals?
Yeah.
I love that you said that about shared language and that being a really important part. I think the other important part to get right is having shared ownership. I'm sure we've all been in the situation where you, as a people leader or people team member, have been asked to roll out goals for the company. And it goes from being this collective experience about strategy to being really another people project that is annoying and people want to ignore and just becomes part of the noise. So I think that moment where it goes from a strategic element and lever to just another programmatic thing is one of the pitfalls. And the only way I've found to avoid that is it's shared and joint ownership. My job as a people leader, despite being asked to do this in the past, is not to read the goals of every employee that are in Lattice and decide whether they are cascading up appropriately or align and adhere to our framework. I wish I didn't have to give that example, but it's really to make sure that we have a shared understanding of what we're trying to achieve, not only as a team, but as a company.
Yeah. And I think also thinking about, is it a leading indicator or a lagging indicator? So one thing that I did at a company, or we did at a company a few years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, was we set a goal around employee retention. And we said we want to make sure our retention stays under this target. We made so many mistakes in doing that because number one, we didn't actually say what we were trying to do. We didn't articulate our strategy, our talent strategy in any way by just saying we want to retain whatever percent. We also did your 70% rule problem because we picked the actual thing we wanted and not 70% of the thing. And ultimately we just created a conversation about turnover or retention that was not productive when it should have been about performance, or when it should have been about engagement or people doing stretch initiatives or something else. So I think sometimes we can get too caught up in like the perfection of it.
100%. So we talked about common mistakes. What about the flip side? What have you found to be the most effective approach? Is there one goal setting framework to rule them all that ensures accountability?
I don't think that there is a single framework. I think everyone has their favorites. That's important. For me, the simpler and the stickier goals can be, that's the framework you go with. So I feel successful in goal setting if every employee can actually recite our top level goals easily. They don't have to like remind themselves and go on the intranet. It's so very easy. So I suppose any framework that supports simplicity, that's the one that I'm after. And then also, I mean, decide and commit to whatever framework that might be, because no one in the company is ever going to agree that that is their favorite framework because there are so many to choose from. But just decide, commit, and make sure everyone is sort of going and rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. I've been a user of OKRs. I hesitate to say a fan. I feel like they can work. There's a ton of pitfalls, but all of the things we've said around really clarifying language and what it means. So one of the things I did this year with our OKR process is when we launched the process, there was a slide that had a visual made by ChatGPT of a runner. And we said, okay, so imagine this person is Sally and she has an OKR to run a marathon before she turns 40. So what would her key results be, and what would her tactics and dependencies be? So key results would be join a running club, or key results are run 45 long runs on Sunday. So key results are the things that we know that if we do them, we believe they're going to make the objective become true, like running that marathon before you're 40. Tactics and dependencies, like a dependency can be buy new running shoes, right? And so we really wanted to try to delineate what the key results would be for that objective using a personal visual. But I agree with you, Jessica, there's no one framework, right?
And I love what you said, and I've done and used SMART goals, OKRs, VSEM, which is kind of like a V to mom, similar thing. And what I will say is, and just being honest, the one that's going to work the best for your company is probably the one that your CEO is the favorite. Whatever their favorite version is, pick that one.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And I know that it's kind of a little cringy, and some of you are awkward giggling, but I'm not saying it because you want to suck up or because you want to do something else like that. The goal, right? Culture comes from the top, and goal setting is only effective when it's truly lived as a company. And so you want to do something, as Jessica said, that is sticky, right? And that is what's most likely to be sticky and also aligned to the culture and values you have as a company.
100%. And staying on that theme, what about when you have teams and they start to do their own goal setting in addition to the goal setting the company is doing? How do you handle those situations?
Controversial. I'm going to be vulnerable here and share that I've been on a journey with this one. I've got to say, in the beginning, as the HR leader, for me, the most important thing was that we all did exactly the same thing. We followed the process. The admin side was super easy. Come on, everyone, just do what we want you to do. Everyone should do the same thing. But I've got to say that I've grown past that. And I'm actually more in the camp of, at the end of the day, is the goal setting process my most important sort of goal and outcome for myself, or is it trust and partnership with each of my executive peers? 100% the latter. And so I can't really build trust and partnership if I'm the red tape walking in the room and telling them how to manage their teams. And so instead, I've definitely become a lot more flexible, because instead my outcome is that we have great leaders who are setting goals for their team, and their teams have clear expectations and know, what is expected of them, and have fair and consistent performance management. And at the end of the day, if I have a leader who's doing that, I don't care how you get there. Like, yes, please create an amazing employee engagement initiative. Make sure your goal setting, I don't care what you use, as long as the outcome is the same and we're partnering and working together.
I would just add on to that, like that starts with, I think I've been on very much the same journey as you. You know, I started and I was like, I mean, even to the point where one year our goals were, as a people team, were to drive accountability. And we were like, we're going to have 95% of the company set goals within the first 21 days, like 3 weeks of the fiscal year. And you can imagine how that went with sales kickoff. And sales teams generally. And I think from that, and you know, honestly with that, my sales leader came to me and said, hey, some things to consider. Number one, rhythm of the business, but two, what is already happening on the team? How are quotas set? Are quotas in fact part of those goals? And I think that goes to the point that each business unit is often not only in a different place, like in terms of maturity, because like often they are, especially if we're part of like growing, changing, scale up and startup culture, but they also may have their own language. And so what I care about more and what I've come to care about more is that we have a common understanding of what results look like, and that goals are based on results, not activity, and the how of it and the language. That really matters so much less to me at this point. Yeah, like I don't want to be the red tape. I want to be the enabler.
I totally agree. I do think there needs to be that performance point though for accountability. Like one structure that I've used in the past, and I've just rolled it out in our team this year, is an OKR squad. So you've got your leaders that are obviously looking at goals, but then you have, there's always roles that are a little bit, they're not a leadership role. Sometimes they're like a senior IC role, or that have a viewpoint on the goals. And we meet twice a quarter. So we meet in the middle of the quarter and we meet at the start of the next quarter. And we just have simple slides that say, what are the biggest learnings from your progress right now? And what are you doing differently next? So we're not going through this big, I need to know exactly where the goals are. That's up to the leaders of those teams to run in whatever way they need to. But we've got this squad where we come together and people actually have to look at their colleagues in their in the whites of their eyes or in the whites of the Zoom screen, I don't know, and say how it's going.
Love that. We all know goals can shift. How do you handle changes mid-cycle, mid-quarter, and calm the chaos?
Oh, you go ahead.
No, you go. I'm happy to start. So, I think this is something we know all too well. If I take myself back, to spring of 2020, which it's probably a little bit of PTSD for, bad faces all around. But the reality was, as we were going through that moment, I was at a sizable public company, and we had full year goals. Not only that were part of the goals we shared with our board, were part of our executive team, but were goals we reported to the street, right? To Wall Street, and we were being judged on. And all of a sudden, we had been thrown this curveball. And not only could we not predict what was going to happen 12 months from now, we couldn't even figure out what was happening 2 weeks from now in terms of our customers, their need, their reaction, how much. So we really had to take a step back and say, is it even fair or appropriate to set goals for the rest of the year? And that forced a really hard conversation across our leadership team, but also with our board around what is our realistic line of sight. Long story, but what I'm getting to is you have to set goals that are realistic for your stage of business and also your broader environment. So we came back and said, we actually think a 6-month goal is going to be what makes sense for us right now. We should have pretty clear line of sight to what we believe to happen in the next 6 months. And then things get real blurry. We have a lot of dependencies after that. And that was such a healthy and helpful conversation for us. And then something that we continued where we began setting goals on a semi-annual basis with kind of stretch ideas for the next 6 months and being able to communicate that way.
I love that. Shorter timeframes make sense, especially when you're in a changing business. I also think we should celebrate canceling goals. If a goal doesn't make sense anymore, there needs to be a canceled option in your Lattice, in your spreadsheet, and harder to do in a public company.
Sometimes.
So I will, but when you've got the flexibility, there should really be let's just walk away from this because it's just gained, it's not lost time, it's gained time, and that fallacy of sunk costs kicks in and we think we got to keep working on the thing that's broken, just don't cancel it.
Well, you know what I love in what you said, which brings me to something else about goal setting. We talked a lot about goals and priorities, but I think it also forces, in the best case, a conversation about what's not a priority. So on one side, you have the canceled goals and what we thought were a priority, but like may have changed. But the other thing is, I think, as important to have the conversation of what does this mean we're not focusing on and what is not going to drive us to our top line business objectives or goals.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, your why doesn't change, and that's the mission, and that's why everyone joins the organization, hopefully. And so as long as that stays and that remains, I think the how is inevitable. That should be changing. Also, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always in environments where we encourage test and try, failure, make mistakes, learn from them, innovate. And if we're truly doing that, making mistakes, learning, then things are going to shift. And I think on the latter part of your question around like how do you then get employees okay with that change, if you're effectively pushing goal setting through your org, I mean, goals should be discussed in every one-on-one. And I mean, there's usually not surprises, or you hope not, because I'm talking to my employees about their goals all the time, and sometimes it's their idea that it should change. Hey, actually, I don't think this is the right thing we should be doing anymore. Tell me more. And so it should always be this partnership where the entire business is talking about whether we're still on the right track and doing the right thing based on what we've learned.
Yeah, 100%. Goals are...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to like jump in there because I think something you touched on that is like so of the moment and where we started, which is like, why are we talking about goals right now and why are they so top of mind for so many people in this room right now? And I think it's because we're in a moment where so much emphasis is being placed on efficiency and accountability and ownership. And goals are one way, as Alexis said, like the connective tissue between strategy and execution. So that's one way that we are measuring this in this moment and are probably like front and center. But we're also in a moment where, I mean, we've heard it all around us today, where so much of, you know, being successful is around innovating, giving people time and space for pilot and experimentation, as you said, Jessica. And so like, how do we hold the balance between the two? And I think canceled goals is like a great version of that. Yeah. Having the right like time frame and like, you know, is a great version of that. But I think that is the elephant in the room. Like, how do we drive to accountability while also keeping flexibility? And I think it's staying in conversation, as you said. It's, you know, it's making sure it's a dialogue, not a directive.
And there's so much uncertainty right now, and I know it's the buzzword. I'm going to say something really controversial. I think we all think goals are super relevant right now because of AI and the economy. Controversial, I actually think those are two very lagging indicators to what organizations are actually driving towards, which is performance and productivity. That will never change. That's always been the case. CEOs want to push for a high performance culture. CFOs want to work with CPOs to measure productivity as a number ratio to revenue or net profit, right? These are the two most important things. And honestly, goal setting for me is the most objective way to measure those two things. So many of us, I bet everyone will raise their hand, have a love-hate relationship, maybe more hate with performance reviews, right? Everyone talks about it and performance management overall. And I think that one of the reasons for that is because so much work has to go into them before, during, and after the reviews, largely because they end up being so highly subjective that you have to train managers and make sure employees are getting the right feedback. And one thing that's not as subjective is goal setting. You decide what goal you should focus on, you have a milestone date, and then you either hit it or you didn't. And so, yeah, performance, productivity, goal setting, they sort of all go hand in hand.
Those are great insights. We're going to switch it up and have one fun goal, and then we'll go to some of the questions on the Slido. So, rapid fire, biggest personal goal for the year?
It was my idea to add this question to the thing, and I don't have a personal goal to share with you, but I have an anecdote about my daughter's personal goal achievement. She just turned 9 on Sunday. If you're willing to let me brag about my kid for a second. And we think it connects to AI because it's a tech conference and we have to connect inane things to AI. So I will get there. My daughter takes competitive dance, so she dances a bunch of times a week. and she has been working for months on getting an aerial, which is basically just when you like run and do a cartwheel and you don't put your hands on the ground. So like you're flying literally somehow. And she's been working on it and working on it and working on it. And she had this push, this like performance point, which is AI in the metaphor, stay with me. And she had this push from her the dance director who said, if you get your aerial, I'll put it on stage in the big number next year. And she had it done in a week. So goal achieved for Cameron Walsh.
Love that. We were trying to get a photo of it, but
I feel like tough love is exactly what's
exactly.
happening right now. AI's here. Do better with your job. And it's like, okay.
I got it. Yeah. And now to the video. Just kidding.
I'm happy to share and jump in. So I had a little bit of a health issue last year, and what it meant for me is that I was no longer able to do something I loved, which was basically extreme group fitness, if there is such a thing. Like if there is a weird buzzy fitness class, like, you know, trampoline dance, like I have fully done it and committed. And I am aging and dating myself to say SoulCycle has been like the most of my fitness loves for many, many years. And so I'm working with a physical therapist right now to kind of get back up to my same level of conditioning. So my personal goal is to complete a SoulCycle class while still on the bike and not like on the floor desperately gasping. So that's my goal this year.
I appreciate your goal because I feel like your extreme exercise offsets the fact that I don't do it at all. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here for that.
Balance.
And I will say, because like Alexis so beautifully drew like, you know, these like insights and comparisons, like the hard thing for me, I'm sure not like any of you, is I tend to like be a little bit competitive with myself and broadly, and I really like to be a good student. So it's really hard for me to not only be bad at something, but to be bad at something I used to be good at, if that's familiar to anyone. Yeah. And I think for me, one of the things that I've really learned in this process and gets reinforced a lot by my physical therapist is this is not a linear process, right? Progress is not always linear. And the point is both getting to the goal and sometimes the process and learnings along the way. So like she'll do a lot of like correcting my form or giving me, sometimes a exercise doesn't work and we have to tweak and pilot and experiment. And I think those are all things that it's humbling but important to be reminded of.
I actually think that's a really important aspect of goal setting, though, is that process. And I think sometimes like a danger of AI in general is that we sometimes are jumping to the solution and we're not actually like doing the work. And the work of getting like 30 people to think about what their goals are for their teams, talk about it, like summarize, synthesize what were my biggest takeaways, that work actually builds better professionals, even though sometimes it might not feel like it's the actual outcome we're trying to drive. So it's like a side benefit, which is just like your physiotherapist side benefit. Yeah, you get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I should have went first because mine is so boring.
Well, now you're coming to a SoulCycle class with me, right?
No. You guys heard me when I said I don't exercise, right? You have that on camera. For me, I just decided that I was going to have a yes month, which has turned into a yes 3 months, and professionally. So sitting here right now is part of my goal. So this is, I think, the third panel and speaking event that I've done, which I'm very much the introverted HR leader. I do my job, I get it done. But I promised myself I'd just say yes anytime I was invited to do something like this in public. And so I'm doing it.
Lattice loves that.
Yeah.
All right, we have a couple questions coming through. Our first one's from Shannon. What creative ways have you increased engagement or excitement among employees with goal setting?
I can tell you something that worked in my people team specifically. So we have goals in our people team that are, fairly lofty and generally connected to employee engagement or quality of hire performance. And then we're really thinking about how do we actually get work done all the time. So we built out this process. It was inspired by our talent team, who was inspired by our engineering team. The process is called People Team Sprints. And what we do is we commit to the objective we're going to achieve in a 2-week sprint. So it's generally connected to a goal. Sometimes it's disconnected to a goal because we have other work that needs to get done. And we identify what the phase of the project is. Are we trying to research? Are we trying to build? Are we trying to get feedback? And we give some details. And then we say where we feel it's at in terms of a status and where we want it to be at the end of 2 weeks. And we come together at the beginning and end of every 2 weeks and update each other on our sprints. And it actually gives us, like, it's a bit like a to-do list in the morning. You wake up and you're like, okay, these are my priorities. This is what I have to do. And it's really helped us in the people team get tighter with goals.
I love that. Something that also, I've done at a company is we've actually really moved up goal setting in terms of where it falls into the employee life cycle. So one thing we did that was really effective was we essentially said goal setting was something that had to be done in your first week of onboarding and put that as part of the onus on the manager and said, you are hired somebody for a reason. They are here to help fulfill a purpose and a goal, and this is fresh in everyone's mind. And we also know that people appreciate having a purpose at work. So we did a few things with this. Number one, we said people need to make an impact in their first week. Figure out one thing, and they would report back in new hire onboarding and then to like a public chat, Slack channel about what is one thing they accomplished at work in their first week. And then two, they should have their goal set and clarity at least for their first quarter, because that's really part of the manager's job, and that really became part then of our talent acquisition process. So as you were building out a job description, you also had to build out your 30, 60, 90-day plan with goals and bring that through the goal setting process. And that really began the conversation. So that goal setting was not one directional, but it started as a collaboration literally from day one, or day -1 in our case.
Love that.
That's great.
Let's see, we've got another one here. How do you manage cross-functional ownership of goals if delivery depends on another team? How do you share that goal?
The teams share the goal. Like, we're one team. Like, you just have to, we have to break down the silos. It's a, marketing and people initiative, and we share the goal. You just share the goal.
I will say this question brings up an interesting perspective, though, which is, and I could be reading it wrong, but it's sort of the reactive, hey, we have a shared goal, how are we going to get this done? And I've had that experience where you set goals in a silo in a way that you actually don't even realize that the other team had a goal that had anything to do with your team. And you're like, wait a minute, we have our own goals. We're very specific about the time frame. How are we going to fit this other thing in?
Yeah.
And so really the learning lesson on cross-functional goals is set them together in the beginning. Once all teams have their goals, review them as an executive team, make sure there is or isn't overlap, understand where you connect and where you relate, and get to that place before the goals are set. So important.
Love that. Absolutely. And then how about when leadership maybe isn't bought in on a goal framework or a goal setting exercise? How have you handled that?
With great frustration. I think, if you can't influence that, there's got to be some kind of target or mission that you can attach to, and then build out the mission for your team. So what is your purpose in the company? And then how do you choose initiatives that will tie to your purpose within the company?
Yeah, and I think that's, obviously you want to try to influence this at the company-wide level and strategically within your peer cohort. But even as a people team, if you're, kind of early to this, I think there becomes a little bit of a viral effect there, where other people see your team energized, mobilized, and having a degree of clarity. And then you can build some organic momentum from that too. So we think of them as top down, and absolutely culture starts, strategy starts from the top, but you also need that groundswell up.
Yeah.
How have you improved the operationalization of goals planning? What frameworks have you found valuable?
I wish I had a better answer for this, but I'll start by saying, for us, it usually starts in a planning meeting at, sometime. And it really starts with conversation. And I think the first foundational piece is making sure as a leadership team, you have, kind of the right shared perspective, insights, and communication and trust to be able to communicate and challenge each other. And for us, we just started simply with what do we hope to achieve next year and what does success look like? And I think being able to facilitate a conversation starting there and starting with the kind of what's possible, what would being wildly successful look like to you, and building from that shared space has been really effective.
Yeah, +1 on the outcomes for the company. I would add there too, really important to understand what drives each of your functional peers. How does the CFO use goal planning? And how does the CEO think about goal planning? How does your chief commercial officer think about goal planning? And I think as long as you each understand what you're trying to get out of it, coming together and collaborating on how you operationalize that becomes easier.
We did a process in our senior leadership team offsite last October where we identified, our head of marketing pulled up a list of levers that we could pull in the business to improve revenue. So being are we going to find new geographies to sell into? Are we going to improve our quality of our product in general, et cetera? Identify new ICPs. And then we went through a process of it took many days, but identifying ultimately which levers we agreed were going to both have the most impact and were most readily in our control. And then we tied all of our objectives to those levers. So that was was somewhat useful. Yeah.
I would add one more thing to this, which is a lot of these questions too are sort of these challenges that us as HR leaders and HR people face. One thing I would say has worked for me is sometimes you just have to find your bestie in the organization, right? Your executive bestie or others. So meaning if we really know that goal setting is important, operationalizing goal setting is important, but maybe we're not able to evangelize that on our own, find someone who can do it with you.
Totally.
I've had that experience where I'm like, come on, goal setting's so important, we should do it. And, it took a little while, and then I kept partnering and evangelizing it with others, and then me and my chief commercial officer together were like, actually, yes, this is important. Now you have two people saying this is really important that we track goals, that we measure goals. Then the CFO is there, and then all three of us are going to the CEO going, where are you ready for goals now?
Yeah.
And so find your people.
I love that, Jessica, and I think there's something else that you touched on there, which is the what's in it for me. So even for me, it's been as simple as reframing from goal setting to prioritization when introducing it at a company. And so if I started talking about goal setting, it was all my peers glazed over. This was when they started answering emails, in our exec team meeting or responding to Slacks. But when we started talking about prioritization, there was something in it for everyone because we were all in a place where we felt like we had so many competing priorities, so many things on our plate, we couldn't possibly tackle everything. And when what's in it for me with your besties at your side, we were able to move to that idea.
Well, that's how you make besties. Let me make your life easier. I'll tell you how, and then I get something out of it too. Great, win-win. Yeah.
How about when a team's not meeting their goals? How do you ensure psychological safety?
I think the behavior, I always feel like culture is a product of the behaviors that we celebrate and the behaviors we don't tolerate. So if you have leaders that are, losing it over someone not hitting a goal and not getting curious about what happened and not digging in and asking, that is a recipe to, create a worse environment from a psychological safety perspective. So I think it's all this good same stuff we talk about in terms of giving feedback and modeling the right behaviors.
I would just the thing that you said that was the key for me that I could not agree more with is starting with curiosity.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
An entire team not hitting their goals. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think I would carry that up too at some point, right? And you know, with your executive peers, talk about why an entire team's goal setting was not what it was supposed to be. I don't know that it's at the employee level that requires better psychological safety, and why aren't you hitting your goal, but more, did you set the right goals?
right.
Why is your
Yeah,
entire
exactly.
team
Some of
not
those
hitting
goals.
them?
Yeah, totally.
Like, yeah.
How do you keep employees engaged with goal setting without micromanaging and the process and making sure it's more than just a checkbox?
I think the People Team Sprints thing I gave was an example of that, and I think the reason that works for our People Team is that it's always on our mind. So however that works in your team, making sure that it is relevant to the work they actually have to do, that it's not, that it doesn't represent, a side hustle they now have to take on in their workplace because they have their real job. Like, as long as it's relevant and as long as as a team, you're continually checking in on it, I think you're in a better place. I don't think like having someone, like you said, audit the SMART goals. I just got like 2009 flashbacks that were deeply uncomfortable. That kind of auditing doesn't work.
I love that. And I would also say, oftentimes I'm tying my team's goals with their career opportunities and career advancement, because at a certain level, really at all levels, everyone wants career development, and the way you get that is by building new skill, taking on new challenges, being open to new projects, and setting aspirational goals is just one way that we allow them to build their career. And that is really engaging all by itself, sort of that carrot at the end.
100%. Last one here. How do we encourage groups with the same quarterly goals? So it sounds like repetitive goals. How do we keep them engaged and excited about those?
Oh, and it's the same goal over and over and over is the person who wrote that? Is that what? Yeah, that sounds really boring.
Yeah.
I would question if it's the same goal again and again and again. Maybe it's just regular work that, like, our goal should be, where are we moving the business differently? It's not strategic if it's actually just a list of your job. I actually encountered that once with a leader who gave me a list of KRs, and it was literally a task list. I'm like, well, this is just, maybe they need to do these tasks, but these are not goals. So I would maybe question the premise of the actual goals and how can you adjust them so that they are moving the business in a new direction.
Might be an option, but I would rethink the time frame also. I've had experience where, again, testing and trying, learning as you go, that we recognize that actually our objectives should be annual and our KRs should be quarterly. And then like the projects and initiatives that go under the KRs might be monthly. And so I would just question, is it actually a quarterly goal or more an annual goal? And there are actually different initiatives and projects that change every quarter. So I would maybe just rethink the time frame a little bit.
Yeah. Any live questions? I think we have time for maybe one question.
Oh.
We got a mic coming your way.
I'm wondering how you approach, let's say you've got some employees that are struggling to hit their goals, how you coach managers into a different conversation. So now you're moving from goals into performance.
I think that's, like, as Jessica said, these in many ways are two sides of the same coin. So, like, goals is really a indicator, right, often in terms of performance, either as an individual, team, or company. And so I think you start with curiosity, right? What is getting in your way? I always think, like, the role of a manager, it's so trite, but it is to, like, help remove obstacles or stumbling blocks. So if you start there and say, what is keeping you from reaching these goals, and then try to understand the environment, I think that really helps with coaching through that. I feel like you have something.
No, yeah, 100%. And then I think it might also go back to being aligned on the type of culture of goals you have, because if goals and performance are typically separate, we should talk about why that is. And so, and maybe that's right for your culture and for your organization, or you have an organization where the goals are the performance, and so that's always the conversation, is if you're not hitting your goals, then you're not performing. Of course, we have competencies and behaviors and career ladders, and things can get really complex. But yeah, I think it goes back to what type of culture do you have? Should they be intertwined? Should they be separate? What does that look like? How does performance and goal setting come together?
And I think also, like, what's getting, again, curious with the person. I mean, like, I think a common trait that folks have, that folks with neurodiversity or ADHD have, is task avoidance. So sometimes the fact that it's written as a goal actually makes it something I don't want to do. And so then it's about getting curious with that person, like, so what's getting in the way here? What are the ways that we could enable you to get excited about it, or do it in a fresh way, or partner, or have an accountability partner for that? So I wonder if it's like, if it's not the goal, if it's not, and it seems like maybe it's the person and they're not a bad performer, I would get deeper on, like, why are they avoiding it?
Yeah, and I think that just the curiosity is, I think, the key to so many of these things, right? Because it's also understanding, do they understand the purpose of this, right? So often I found when people are not meeting or working towards a goal, it's because they think that goal doesn't matter,
Right.
or, like, you know, it's not the right work. And so I think just continuously being curious is probably the best advice there.
And maybe this part is obvious, but I also think in those moments, it's yes, performance goals, but it's an additional nudge to make sure the managers are setting the right goals with employees. So again, that question of, well, why aren't they hitting this goal? Was it the right goal? Are they unable to hit this goal? Who's working with them on this goal? So, my team always knows that my first question is, where's the manager in all of this, before we even get to the employee level. So,
That.
Fantastic. So many great tips, so many great insights. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Please join me and thank you for this panel.